And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown.
This is Dabu7 with what is checking out to be a pretty big find here. We are talking about the cache of information that was released through FOIA pertaining to the Hillary Clinton emails. And in it, there was talk of Nephilim and Gilgamesh being discovered in this. You can open up this in a PDF viewer, and you can see for yourself that this is very real, that this was in there. F2019-02110, it is there, requesting the documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh. The same Gilgamesh that I told you years ago, they found his body in Iraq, and it disappeared. They wanted to know the location of his body and the location of the buried Nephilim.
Now you can see here it says this is from Denitra Senegar. That's who it's from. This is to Hillary Clinton. Important for context. And then it says, well, you can read it there. Can you see what it says? I mean, requesting documents pertaining to the resurrection chamber of Gilgamesh, the location of his body, and the location of the buried Nephilim.
We had the opportunity in 2003 to test one of the oldest stories, if not the oldest story, of human civilization, and it's the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, Gilgamesh is a really interesting figure. The Sumerian and Babylonian narratives speak about rulership over human beings, or kingship, as having come down from the skies. It's those who've come down from the skies who govern over human society for a long, long time, aeons and aeons. And then there comes a point where they hand over to human kings, and they somewhat recede into the background. In that story, there's a crossover king, a hybrid person called Gilgamesh. He's part sky people, part human. In April 2003, a German-led research team announced it had found King Gilgamesh's tomb. It was an incredible moment in the history of religion and archaeology. Not much more than a month after the first U.S. invasion of Iraq under George H.W. Bush, a research team led by Jörg Fassbinder of the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments in Munich announced the incredible discovery they had made. With scarcely contained excitement, Fassbinder spoke to the BBC and said, "The most surprising thing was that we found structures already described by the Epic of Gilgamesh. We covered more than 100 hectares. We have found garden structures and field structures just as described in the Epic. By differences in magnetization in the soil, you could look into the ground. The difference between mud bricks and sediments in the Euphrates River gives a very detailed structure. I don't want to say definitively that it was the grave of King Gilgamesh, but it looks very similar to that described in the Epic. We found, just outside the city, in the middle of the former Euphrates River, the remains of such a building as could be interpreted as a burial place." What an outstanding opportunity to test the relationship of those mythologies against scientific fact. We could DNA test the remains of that person in the tomb marked Gilgamesh. Potentially, it was one of the most significant archaeological finds in history. Once the find had been located and cordoned off, the First Iraq War ended within a matter of days.
Invasion which toppled Hussein, Astonishing discoveries were being made in Iraq, culminating in one of the most extraordinary claims anywhere for centuries, a claim which American forces have been strongly accused of confiscating, subsequently becoming the prime suspect as the driving force behind a complete suppression of these astonishing discoveries within the country. In April of 2003, Jörg Fassbinder of the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments in Munich told the BBC's World Services Science and Action program, quote, "I don't want to say definitively that it was the grave of King Gilgamesh, but it looks very similar to that described in the epic. We found just outside the city, an area in the middle of the former Euphrates River, the remains of such a building which could be interpreted as a burial," Mr. Fassbinder said. In the book, Gilgamesh is described as having been buried under the Euphrates. He said the amazing discovery of the ancient city under the Iraqi desert had been made possible by modern technology. The most surprising thing was that we found structures already described by Gilgamesh, Mr. Fassbinder stated. "We covered more than 100 hectares. We found garden structures and field structures as described in the epic, and we found Babylonian houses. Here, predictably, is where the story goes silent. Due to conflict within the country, it was largely believed the excavations had been halted. However, it seems that the discovery of King Gilgamesh may not have been made in isolation. This footage was supposedly leaked to numerous places across the internet and has largely been put down as authentic footage of the find. Shortly after this was taken, reports state that American forces moved in and seized the find." He was the fifth king of Uruk, and his power was so mighty, many believe that the stories surrounding him are just myths that were built around his seemingly superhuman strength and endurance. However, serious scholars concluded that the story of Gilgamesh was nothing more than a fairy tale due to the astonishing story. Gilgamesh sets out on a quest to find the meaning of life and, finally, some way of defeating death. In doing so, he becomes the first epic hero in world literature. The grief of Gilgamesh and the questions his friend's death evoke resonate with every human being who has wrestled with the meaning of life in the face of death. Is this leaked footage of the tomb of Gilgamesh?
So, we pick up in Genesis, right? He confounds the languages. Now, if you look through lots of ancient Hebrew literature, you'll see that they believe that there were 70 different languages that came out of the Tower of Babel. 70 different nations. I believe Hebrew was the original language, the language of God, and I believe through Abraham, the language of Hebrew was retained. And then you got 69 other people groups speaking 69 other languages. And then you have all these people going off with different languages, 69 different languages, talking about the same guy who was their former leader, but now his character becomes known by a number of different names through different cultures. These are just a few. Gilgamesh, Baal, Melkart, Adonis, Dumuzi, Dionysus, Bacchus, Mithra, Orion, Apollo, Tammuz, Osiris. You know, you start seeing characteristics of these gods, and many of them are almost identical. And you start saying, well, they're too similar to not be the same, and even in the way they're depicted often.
Imagine the startling proposition that the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old, the gods and children of the Watchers, could somehow rise up, could somehow be reconstituted inside of a body. And, of course, I've discussed with you before my theory that one of the greatest legends in history could be a record of that having actually happened. And I'm referring to Nimrod, who some scholars also identify as Gilgamesh of Sumerian fame, Apollo of Greek fame, Osiris of Egyptian fame. And this Gilgamesh was a giant who a lot of people didn't even believe was anything more than myth until his grave marker was found a few years back. And then, according to some people, the military swooped in and took possession and control of that dig.
Hey, Tom, I want to interject something. I talked to a special operations general who was there when Gilgamesh's remains, and his words were he was in a state of remarkable preservation, okay? He said they have Gilgamesh's remains. So if they have Gilgamesh and he is Nimrod, they got it. And the whole point was to extract the DNA.
So, flash forward a few years later, the tomb of Gilgamesh was found in April of 2003. And in this case, there was a body. And it was a very large body. And from all accounts that I had read and heard about this, the body was still very well preserved.
Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together.
In desert or secret chambers. This, I believe, is the home run scripture. This is where Yeshua himself says, then if, talking about Antichrist in the last days in Matthew 24, then if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the secret chambers, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles shall be gathered together. They found a moat of water. They pumped the whole thing out. It was full of water, so they pumped all the water out. When they got the water out, this is what they found. There was a moat of water surrounding a square island that had 4 pillars that had ancient writing on it that I would believe are probably instructions for something. In the middle was another moat of water with a little island with about a 10-foot sarcophagus that was empty. The empty tomb of Osiris. Okay. 2003, Gilgamesh tomb was found in the desert of Iraq. One of the things they said about Gilgamesh from the Epic of Gilgamesh, who can compare with him in kingliness? Who can say, like Gilgamesh, I am king? What does the scripture say about the Antichrist? Who is like the beast? Who can wage war with the beast? Very similar. By the way, Gilgamesh was said to have been, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, 2/3 God, 1/3 man. Percentage-wise, 2/3 is what? 66.6%. Just throwing that out there. All right. Our troops went to war. Gilgamesh's tomb was found in April of 2003. We went to war in May. A month later. Kicked out all the archaeologists. First thing our troops did, you can look this up for yourself, first thing our troops did was raid the Museum of Baghdad. You may remember the news reports. We raided the Museum of Baghdad, first thing we did. And then June, about a month later, U.S. authorities announced, oh, yeah, this is great, right? Create the problem, create the solution. Aren't we wonderful? U.S. authorities announced that the world-famous treasures of Nimrud, which is another Nimrod, derivative of Nimrod, were recovered from a secret vault in Iraq's central bank. The artifacts included necklaces, plates, gold earrings, finger and toe rings, bowls, and flasks. Officials said that of the 170,000 items initially believed missing, just 3,000 remain unaccounted for. Yeah, do you think the 3,000 unaccounted for items that we stole from the Museum of Baghdad were toe rings and nose rings? I don't think so. I think we took some pretty significant artifacts. And of those 47 were main exhibit artifacts. Okay, first thing we did, raid the Museum of Baghdad a month after we found Gilgamesh. What did Yeshua say? What did he say? If they say he's in the desert, don't go there. Gilgamesh found in the desert. They say he's in the secret chambers, don't believe him.
Still, the earth-shattering archaeological find is waiting in the structure's third and lowermost chamber.
They say he's in the secret chambers, don't believe him.
What experts had written off as a mere invention of the Greek historian Herodotus now reveals itself to be 100% real.
There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became